Hey, thanks for tuning in to hobbyparts.com. We're going to take a quick look at the Flysky i6 transmitter. It's a new transmitter, mid-range transmitter, below the i10, above the i4. It is the i6. Similar to the T6, a couple of changes. We're going to show you guys what it's all about. So this is the new Flysky i6 transmitter. Very similar to the T6 in menus, actually almost identical in menus. It just has a couple of more features. Let's go over the size differences between the new i6 and the older T6. The size difference, you'll notice that it is a little bit smaller. It's lighter. It's definitely lighter when you're holding it in your hand. And if you look at the thickness, you'll notice the i6 is also thinner. T6 is a lot thicker. The i6 is a lot thinner, and that's due in part because it's no longer using 8 AA batteries. You'll notice on the back of this i6 we're using 4 AA batteries as the power source. 6 volts compared to the 12. It's more efficient, it runs longer than the T6, and it doesn't use as much power. You'll notice it's slimmer, it's sleeker. The LCD screen is about the same size. You're losing the scroll wheel, which I kind of wish to see the scroll wheel, but the up and down buttons work perfectly fine. They're very tactile. When you click on them, you know you're clicking on it, and it works pretty good. You'll notice they move the switches down, VRA and VRB switches. They have been moved down. They're no longer on the top, which is pretty nice. You don't have to reach. Some people don't like to reach on the top corners for the switches. They're all at the front at your fingertips, so it's a little bit closer, so you don't have to remove your eyes from your aircraft when you're messing with the switches. Now notice the joysticks. You'll notice these joysticks, the crown, it's a lot taller and sharper, which grips your finger really well. If you have sweaty palms, sweaty fingers, like I do, I really like this. It grips your thumbs, grips your fingers, so your fingers don't slip when you get nervous doing other tricks and stuff. Let's move on to the frequency hopping system. Now, the older ones use AFHDS. The new ones, they use AFHDS2. Now, one drawback is you're not going to be able to use your AFHDS receivers. You are going to have to move onto the I-series receivers if you use the Flysky i6. That means you can use the i4 receivers, the IA6 receivers. You can also use i10 receivers with telemetry. And this Flysky i6 does support telemetry, and we'll go into that, show you some of those telemetry functions in the menu. So this is AFHDS2, Automatic Frequency Hopping Digital System 2A is what these Flysky i6 transmitters will be using. When you purchase the Flysky i6, it will come with a FSIA6 transmitter. 6 channels for you to choose to use, whether you're mixing, retracts, bomb doors, whatnot. 6 full channels. Let's move on to the functions of the transmitter. Alright, so let's turn on the Flysky i6 transmitter. Once you turn it on, you're going to be greeted with the home screen. Of course, you got your transmitter battery level indicator. AFHDS2A is what it's running on. AFHDS2 is a lot better than AFHDS, the normal AFHDS, in that you get a little bit better range, you get faster transmission, and it supports telemetry, which means down here you can see that it says RX settings. It'll read your receiver voltage. If you put a speed sensor on there, it'll tell you speed sensing, temperature sensing. If you want to sense the temperature on your motor or speed controller, it'll relay that information back to your transmitter, which is nice to see on a mid-range 6-channel transmitter. Let's go through the menus. As mentioned before, it is very similar, in fact, almost identical to the FST6. So those of you with the T6 transitioning to the i6 is going to be real simple. The menus are virtually the same. Let's check out the system menu. Of course, you got model memory. You get 20 models of selection, 20 models that you can store on this transmitter. You got model name. Of course, you can rename the models, type. Of course, you can do helicopter, glider, or plane. Come down, you can copy models. Let's say you have a buddy that has a real cool setting on his Corsair. He can send that information to your transmitter and you can save it. Model reset. Receiver setup. This is where it's different than the T6. Go into receiver setup and you'll notice you can change from AFHDS2. You can select other AFHDS systems. Receiver battery. You can set an alarm for the receiver battery. If you're using telemetry, the alarm goes off at 4.2 volts, of course. and you can set that to a different setting. Failsafe, sensors list. If you have sensors plugged up, it'll tell you which sensors it's reading. You can choose different sensors on here to display. Like mentioned before, your speed and distance, your iBus if you're using that, and your servo frequencies. That's pretty much what's different on this transmitter. All right, so let's check out the function setup. As mentioned before, it's pretty much identical to the T6, but those of you that have not seen the menus, let's go and show you guys what it can do, what this transmitter can do. First menu in the functions is servo reversing. What that does is it reverses your servos. So if your channel 1 or 2 aileron and elevator is reversed, head on into this menu, change the parameters, and you'll reverse your flaps or your ailerons, elevators, or rudder. Get on out of there. Endpoints, servo endpoints. If you want to adjust your endpoints, they're all set at 100. Very crucial to adjust your servo endpoints on your retracts, especially dynam retracts, air-filled retracts. You do want to play with the endpoints if your retracts are acting a little weird. Get out of there. Display, what this does is it displays your servo positions. Now, if your servo was, half moving, like your flaps. Also, endpoints really play a role. You'll notice if you lower your endpoints, your servo won't move as far. So this is a good indicator. The display indicator indicates your servo travel and your servo movement, which way they're moving, which is pretty cool. A digital display of your servos moving. It's also a good way to check to see if you're getting any control on your servo. Let's say one of your servos is damaged. You go in there and you're saying, oh, look, one of my servos isn't operating. So go in here, check the display. You can also do a little bit of diagnosis, if you will. Auxiliary channels. Basically, auxiliary channels, if I want to move my flaps, my flaps are on channel 5. And channel 5 is on VRA, which is this dial right here. If I don't want my channel 5 on VRA, which is a dial, and I want my flaps on, my left hand at, SWA. So you go in here, you select it, and I'm going to select SWA. So channel 5 is now on SWA. Now my flaps are operated with SWA and not VRA. So it's pretty cool how you can assign these switches and dials to channel 5 and channel 6. Moving on to subtrim, we all know what subtrim does. It's a finer adjustment of trim. These are your trims right here. You do want to make sure your plane or your vehicle is mechanically centered before you start messing with the subtrim. But this transmitter does offer subtrim. You can adjust those. Dual rate exponential, everybody wants these on their upper end transmitters. This basically dictates how your plane will handle. Dual rates basically limits travel. Exponentials is the rate at which your movement goes. So if you want a linear movement or an exponential movement, let's say you don't want your plane to be so sensitive towards the center. So you add in exponential, make it less sensitive towards the center. And if you're doing acrobatics or any crazy flights, let's say you're doing 3D helicopter, you want it to be a little more sensitive towards the center, go ahead and increase that exponential, make your joysticks a lot more sensitive. Awesome feature. That's the feature you want to use when you get a better transmitter instead of a ready-to-fly type of system without dual rate and exponential. Throttle curve, this is used pretty much mostly for gas or nitro vehicles or aircrafts. I don't really use this on electric aircrafts, but it is in there if you're a gasser or a nitro guy or girl. Mixing. You're mixing certain channels. If you're mixing channel 1 and 2, if you're doing elevons, flaperons, you can mix in here. They also have pre-set up mixes. Elevons, let's say you're flying a pop wing, you're flying one of our Delta Wing FPV planes. Head on to elevon. Very easy to set up if you don't want to mess with individual mixing. VTail, let's say you have our Reaper, our drone with the VTail type setup on a plane. This will help you set that up. This transmitter does support it. Switch assign. Again, like before, you can assign different switches to do flight mode or idle mode. This is all gasser or nitro stuff, but you can also change that to your liking. Throttle hold, another gasser or nitro thing. Throttle hold, you can hold the throttle so it doesn't cut out, or you can hit it so it does cut out when you land. Another gasser or nitro thing that you won't necessarily use if you're using electric, but it is there for the guys that do run that. And that pretty much finishes the functions menu. So that sums it up for the new Flysky i6 transmitter. If you want more detailed specs, detailed pictures, head on over to our website, hobbyparts.com. If you have any questions on this transmitter, leave a comment below. We'll be sure to get that answered. And check out, if you don't like the i6 too much, check out the i4. If you want more features, check out the i10. Stay tuned for more videos on hobbyparts.com. We'll catch you guys later.